Day 142 of the Iran hostage crisis. And the Shah's arrival in Egypt complicates efforts to free the hostages. We'll talk about that tonight with the top Iranian diplomat in this country and with the wife of one of the hostages. Tomorrow, it's the New York and Connecticut primaries. Very likely make it or break it time for Edward Kennedy.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
Good evening. This is a new broadcast in the sense that it is permanent and will continue after the Iran crisis is over. There will also be nights when Iran is not the major story, when we'll bring you briefly up to date on Iran, but we'll focus on some other story. That's not the case tonight. Again, today, Iran is the major story, and for the first time on television, we'll provide the opportunity for the wife of an American hostage to speak live with an Iranian official. Once again, today, it all focuses on the deposed Shah. He arrived today in what may be his last haven, Cairo. Egyptian President Sadat escorting the Shah to his quarters in Cairo's finest hospital and telling newsmen that Egypt will be the Shah's permanent home. In Rome, one of Iran's leading religious figures, the Ayatollah Koppel, also known as the hanging judge, told reporters that Sadat will pay for granting asylum to the Shah. Koppel also warned those American hostages accused of spying would be tried and possibly imprisoned. At the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, it is now Tuesday morning. Islamic religious leaders and Tehran radio have been calling for massive demonstrations to protest the flight of the Shah to Egypt. Those demonstrations scheduled to begin within the next hour or so. Because of the Persian New Year, we have no satellite facilities from Iran, but ABC's Bill Blakemore is standing by on an audio circuit. Bill, have those demonstrations begun yet? And does it look as though they really are going to be as massive as have been called for?
Ted, right now people are already gathering at about 10 rallying points throughout the city here to march on the embassy, where they should arrive in about an hour. It's a little early in the morning here to tell just how big the demonstration will be, but it promises to be an angry one. The radio and television have been asking people to join this march in order to show their hatred for American plots, as they put it.
Bill, U.S. officials here are saying that they don't expect the Iranians to take out any of their hostility against the hostages. That is, hostility because the Shah has left for Egypt. Do you share that hope?
So far, none of the Iranian officials, nor the militants at the embassy, nor Ayatollah Khomeini have made any announcements about their next step. It seems clear from some new anti-American films that appeared on television here last night and this march today that we're in for some renewed anti-American dramatics at least. The impression we get here is that the Iranians are still deciding how they will respond to the Shah's move to Egypt, but we should get some more hints about their thinking in about 6 hours when Foreign Minister Mossadegh gives a news conference here.
Thank you very much, Bill Blakemore. Standing by now at the Iranian embassy here in Washington is the senior Iranian diplomat in the United States, the Chargé d'Affaires, Mr. Ali Agha. May I ask you that same question, Mr. Ali Agha? Is your country, do you think, going to take out its anger over the flight of the Shah on the American hostages?
I think the fate of the American captives will be decided by the Islamic Constituent Assembly, and so this has been assured repeatedly by President Bani Sadr. Of course, it was initiated by Ayatollah Khomeini and accepted by the students in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran.
But now, Mr. Ali Agha, the Ayatollah Khalkhali said, as you just heard earlier, that those accused of espionage among the hostages will be brought to trial and possibly sent to prison. It sounds as though we've gone back in time again.
First of all, I personally do not have any knowledge about that. I have heard just from the reports here. And however, the overall decision, again, I like to mention, it is left up to the Islamic Assembly in the sometimes in the near future.
Mr. Ali Agha will be back with you a little later in this broadcast. In a moment, we'll also have a report on the trials of one hostage family and a live conversation with Mrs. Dorothea Moorfield.
No more vinegar and water douches for me. They're such a bother.
Jane, look.
Massengill has a vinegar and water disposable douche. It's convenient.
Vinegar and water?
The ingredients many doctors recommend. But this is pre-mixed, pre-measured, sanitary.
No more bother. Look how cleverly it's designed.
Only Massengill has this special design.
The vinegar and water disposable from Massengill. It's specially designed.
United Airlines announces 10,000 free round trips to be won in April.
It's United's takeoff game.
No, I never win at games.
You could with this. 10,000 free trips.
10,000? Wow.
Choose Hawaii, Florida, anywhere United flies in the U.S.
Wow.
And you can find out right now if you've won.
Wow.
Play United's takeoff game on every flight in April.
Fly the friendly sky.
Wow.
Travel agent.
Steve McQueen is Tom Horn, a common man, a quiet man, an honorable man.
Man of the West, Indian tracker.
He stood for what he believed was right. But many times, he stood alone. Steve McQueen, Tom Horn, rated R.
Starts Friday at these fine theaters. Check newspapers for showtimes.
Coming up next on Barney Miller, moonlighting puts Harris up for some flack at the precinct.
Well, whoopity-doopity-doo.
You know, I expected you to say something like that. However, the number of syllables did surprise me.
Barney Miller, next, right after ABC News Nightline.
For 142 days now, Richard Moorfield has been held hostage at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. And for 142 days, the Moorfield family in San Diego has been trapped by frustration and uncertainty. Here's Ken Kashiwahara.
Every morning after she gets her two boys off to school, Dottie Moorfield writes to her husband Richard, the consul general at the American Embassy in Iran, and now a hostage. She doesn't know if the letter will even get there. The last letter she received from him was in February. He said that he was fine, but not much else.
They sound very much like him, but then I get mad. I get very angry at the fact that he's being held, and in one of them where he says we're allowed to write every three days, I just, you react your anger at the people holding him.
At school, 15-year-old Stephen Moorfield says he thinks about his father all the time. Sometimes, he says, he simply can't get through the school day and has to go home. His brother Kenneth, who is 14, says the experience has been emotionally draining.
I feel frustrated at, where you're trying to keep your emotions and you're trying to keep yourself from getting really excited because, every time it seems it's like a roller coaster ride that, you go up and you go down.
The Moorfield boys seem mature beyond their ages, and that worries their mother.
I think they're having to cope and having to handle more than they should have to in their early teens. And I hope that it doesn't hurt them, that it doesn't leave scarred.
The Moorfields watch more television newscasts than ever before, looking, listening, always hoping. But it is when the day ends that Dottie Moorfield says hope is hardest to come by.
It's when you have to face the fears, the uncertainties, and the worries that I've managed to push aside all day. They all come back and they surface, and everything looks so bleak at night.
Ken Kashiwahara, ABC News, San Diego.
With us now in the studios of our San Diego affiliate, KGTV, is Mrs. Moorfield. I have to ask you, you've obviously been watching television today also. What do you make of it now with the Shah having gone off to Egypt? Do you feel a personal resentment over that, or do you have any compassion for the Shah?
I think the Shah is obviously an ill man. I think the choice to go to Egypt was his to make, and he made it. I hope he finds there the peace that he's looking for.
Now, what about the hopes expressed by the American administration today that none of this will be taken out on the hostages? Clearly, you share the same hope, but what about your convictions? What about your feelings?
I am not sure. I hope it won't be. I assume they've spoken a great deal of justice and honor, and they have promised the hostages will not be harmed. I think I have to hold them to that and assume that they will keep their commitment to see that the hostages remain in good health and unharmed.
Is it your sense that the Iranians have kept those commitments that they've made until now?
I really don't know, because of course we haven't seen. People have not been allowed inside. There's really no way to tell.
Well, Mrs. Moorfield, we'll give you an opportunity to speak to an Iranian official in a moment. We'll be back with Mrs. Moorfield and with Ali Agha in just a moment.
Omni Magazine, your passport to the future. Venture with us into the uncharted frontiers of mind and space, intellect and imagination. Look beyond the technological potential of today's science as we search for new worlds, new meanings, new dimensions. Omni, the multi-award-winning magazine of science, fact, and fiction, the very first of its kind. Omni, the magazine of tomorrow, on sale today.
It's gonna be tough.
I know. Let's settle this over coffee, Counselor.
Good idea. Whoop.
But that's only half a cup. Don't you like my coffee?
I love the rich taste. It's the caffeine I could do without.
You happen to be drinking Brim decaffeinated coffee.
This is Brim?
This is Brim, and it's decaffeinated, so you don't have to stop at half a cup.
If it tastes this rich, I don't want to stop. Fill it to the rim.
With Brim.
Fill your cup to the rim with the rich taste of Brim.
Play McDonald's $1 Million Menu Mania. You could laugh all the way to the bank.
I just won $25,000.
In all, there's over $1 million in cash and free food prizes, like a Big Mac or an icy Coca-Cola.
I won $5,000.
Play McDonald's $1 Million Menu Mania. You could laugh all the way to the bank.
Oh, man.
A lot's changed in Philadelphia since 1866, but they still love stickball on Kamak Street, and Breyer's ice cream is still #1. It's still made with sweet, ripe fruit, real vanilla beans, rich, dark chocolate, and nothing artificial. That's how Breyer's made friends in 1866, and that's how we're making new ones every day. Breyer's, the all-natural ice cream, since 1866.
With us now live from San Diego and Washington, again, Mrs. Dorothea Moorfield and Mr. Ali Agha at the Iranian Embassy. To both of you, let me say, obviously, the press has been greatly involved in this crisis all along, and it occurred to us here that you two might have a lot to say to each other, particularly Mrs. Moorfield. Is there anything you would like to ask Mr. Ali Agha?
Well, certainly my first question is, how can the government of Iran, in view of the fact that your president admits what has been done is a breach of international law, the UN has condemned your country for it, how can you continue to hold these innocent people?
Well, Mrs. Moorfield, how could you remain silent in the past 27 years when your government was involved in torturing, killing, and doing all kinds of corrupt action against our people? You see, we cannot really ask these questions out of context. And I am saying this not just to react to you. I am requesting to you to look at the whole picture, not just at one segment of it. And I think enough has been said in this respect. Of course, I respect your feeling and the feeling of your children, and that I personally and humbly are sorry for, your feelings, but this is something that has a history behind it. And I think one thing that I should say is that, you have been perhaps watching too much TV, as you and I both are on TV. I should thank, at least for the title of this show that has been changed from Iran Crisis, America Held Hostage into Nightline. Even these small changes, can have effect on the subconscious of people, especially like yourself, who are, concerned certainly more than anybody else.
Mr. Ali Agha, permit me to interrupt for a moment just to give Mrs. Moorfield another chance to get a question in. I'm sure there's more she'd like to ask you.
Sure.
Right. One thing I would, of course, like to say on the history is there is also a long history of diplomatic immunity. But to go on to my next question, why are we not being allowed to hear from the hostages? Why are we not corresponding with them? Why are there so few phone calls coming out? Why isn't there mail coming out of that embassy in Tehran?
Well, perhaps one reason is because your CIA is so sophisticated. You know, look at Canada, the way they got some of the people whom perhaps we didn't have anything really against them out from Iran. I think really the security measure is the main reason behind this. In fact, not I think, I believe that. Imagine in a free revolutionary society, you know, everybody could take any action. So I think this is because of the security measure, really, nothing else.
You buy that, Mrs. Moorfield?
No, I don't. I don't see how a letter from my husband to me or a phone call from my husband to me could be a threat to your security in any way.
Well, remember, some of the letters were kept here, and this was, told here in the media that were kept in the U.S. Department of State. How do you know that they are not holding the letters from your husband?
I see that would serve them no purpose. Why then, if you think the State Department you let a third party in?
You should.
A Swiss or someone, why are there not photographs being taken and sent out of all the hostages? Why do we only see a few?
You see, I do not know about that. I sincerely do not know the answer to that. But as far as the letters are concerned, Mrs. Moorfield, you know that right after John Thomas came back from Tehran with over 120 letters, over 140 letters, then all of a sudden there was a pour out of letters, and then later on we realized that these letters were kept in the State Department away from the families. And here I should say really I'm not accusing any individual, but certainly there is an interest, it appears to me, in the past 142, 43 days, that there is an interest to keep these people as hostage in Tehran, in this country. And you people have the right to find out more than I myself
Mr.
why
Aliaga,
this is the case.
if I may, let me interrupt for a second. Are you accusing the administration now of prolonging the Iranian crisis for political reasons? For what reasons?
Well, I am saying that if you look at the history of the past 140-some days, you see the ups and downs politically in this country. You see, internally, there is still a problem that if anybody shows any flag, any official shows any flag against the Shah in this country, it will be considered as a suicide. Look what happened to Kennedy. Then externally, if anybody says anything against the Shah, what are they going to do with Sadat? What are they going to tell to other puppets across the world? I mean, these are political realities in this country.
Mr. Aliaga, I'm afraid we have run out of time. I do thank you for being with us this evening, and Mrs. Dorothea Moorfield, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment.
The makers of the laxative most often recommended by doctors announce the great taste of oranges and the natural goodness of grain together in new orange-flavored Metamucil. Made from grain, rich in bulk with no chemical stimulants to give gentle, effective relief from occasional constipation.
That is a nice taste.
Made from natural grain with a pleasant taste of oranges. New orange flavor Metamucil.
I looked at Rabbit, Chevette, and Civic. But once I looked at this new Mazda GLC, that's all it took.
Just one look. That's all it took. Yeah, just one look. That's all it took.
I really like Mazda GLC's great standard features. And its great mileage. I also like the looks of its nice low price.
Yeah, the more you look, the more you like.
We were going to bring you a special report on the campaign of Senator Ted Kennedy in New York, but live television. A reminder, we'll be here tomorrow night along with Frank Reynolds and the ABC News political team to give you the results of the New York and Connecticut primaries, as well as the latest news. That is our report for tonight. This is Ted Koppel. For all of us here in Washington and at ABC News, good night.
This has been ABC News Nightline.